What's up, everybody? Thralls of Metal here. I'm Jammin John.
I'm Necrotic.
And we are bringing you yet another album review. Now, this band that we're about to go over is one that we've been fans of pretty much since their first album, at least. And so we definitely wanted to go over this record. We are going over the latest offering from Maul, In the Jaws of Bereavement. This comes out on October 4th on 20 Buck Spin Records. This band formed in 2017 in Fargo, North Dakota. This is the band's second full-length and their debut on 20 Buck Spin. They came from Redefining Darkness. I think 20 Buck Spin is a good home.
Oh, yeah.
20 Buck Spin doesn't miss.
I actually did a solo review for Seraphic Punishment a while ago. I really dug that album, and yeah, like that was like one of my main reasons for wanting to go back over this. Plus, you know, they're pretty cool guys. And really? How many death metal bands do you know from Fargo, North Dakota? Don't ya know? Oh, yeah, betcha there's not many. Yes. Sorry, all of Fargo.
We've seen these guys a couple times, including Denver Death Fest. They were one of the first, I think, major bands booked on Denver Death Fest. For those of you that don't know, this band is pretty much old school death metal for fans of bands like Tribal Gaze, Phobophilic, a little bit of Mutilatred. And, well, I think they've escaped that sound a little bit.
This album is notably different. I mean, first off, like, you can definitely tell the production is a lot different than Seraphic Punishment. Seraphic Punishment definitely, I mean, it had a gritty old school feel. There was a lot of atmosphere. It felt more like reverby.
Yeah.
This one sounds tighter and way more brutal. Now, this album was produced by Adam Tucker, who, I mean, I don't think many know him quite yet, but I had to bring him up because he is in a band called Bill Pulmonary Embolism. And I absolutely love that name. That is brilliant.
Yes.
But this production on here, in comparison to the first one, is a lot more crisp, a lot more, I don't know, just crunchy sounding. Like, everything is just loud and heavy and massive. And it kind of strips away the atmosphere, like kind of the fog has lifted from the last album, which I kind of like that fog.
Right.
But underneath, you hear just the kind of raw grittiness of this band, because it's just kind of go for the throat, go for the pit. Unless you're, you know, over 40, then stay the hell away from it if they play any of these songs.
Yeah, I don't think you want to get in there. There's going to be a lot of broken teeth. Overall, I would say that this album stays mostly in the mid-tempo to slower range. It never really leaves the groovy pocket.
About the fastest it gets is, you know, some D beats. Like, there's a couple of moments that are, you know, pretty much D beats. Like, you get some syncopation in there, and two steps, which two steps, you know, happen with some frequency on the last one, but it doesn't get past that speed, which on the previous album, there was definitely some more like, you know, up-tempo kind of thrashy rhythms. But when it comes down to the riffs on here are just bludgeoning. Like, every riff on this album is like blunt force trauma riffing. Right from the rip with the title track, you just kind of sense it. Like, this is more about like syncopated grooves, heavy chugs. Like, there's definitely a lot of like old school death metal, but it feels more like in line with like Obituary, maybe Jungle Rot, but also like throw in some like more brutal spices in there, like Dying Fetus and Sanguisugabog. Songs like Blood Quantum and Spontaneous Stigmata, lot of like just old school death metal flavors, heavy on the groove, like double time chugs, and it's just heavier than hell. And, you know, on top of all this music, you have Garrett's absolutely gross vocals. This dude has multiple ranges or multiple demons lodged in his throat because, man, like, he just has, like, pretty much like that wide wheelhouse of different kinds of, like, extreme screams, like high, vicious screams that are almost blackened at times, mid-range, just kind of like almost a hardcore kind of bark mixed with death metal, and then really, really low gurgles. Like, he's kind of got everything.
It's really entertaining to watch live. Like, he really goes for the throat. There's no denying that that dude is definitely screaming from the underbelly. Like, he really goes for it, and he really goes for it in this record. To be honest, he sounds feral most times, and I really dig that. Especially on the last track, Drawn to Drowning. Towards the end of there, he really is giving it all he has, and I think he touches on every vocal styling that's in his wheelhouse in that song.
He is essentially like kind of the conductor commanding the bodies to slam into one another in the pit. I don't think they'd probably need much prompting as soon as they hear some of these riffs on here. Yeah, it's gonna pretty much just like, well, I have to punch my buddy in the face. The song told me so. And right in that opening track, you have a guest appearance from Vince from the Acacia Strain, and those two harmonizing together oh man, it's like one demon pig fighting the other demon pig, but they also trade off vocals, but when they layer them together, it's like, dude, that is insanely heavy.
Well, I'm not a real big fan of Vince's vocals live, because I've seen the Acacia Strain, and it wasn't the greatest.
I've seen him multiple times. He sounded great, except for probably the one time you saw him.
Yeah, well, that time. But yeah, I think on albums, I think Vince sounds particularly punishing. He just sounds mean and pissed off. That paired together with Garrett, it works really well.
Now, probably the biggest thing that I notice on here, I mean, and it kind of lends itself to the production too, is the fact that there's a lot more metallic hardcore on here. Like, this is the thing that I think really kind of changes the sound, especially in comparison to the first album. Strangely enough, though, it also kind of sounds like their older material before the first album, their EPs and such. I have a collection I got a while ago, and listening to their older material, the metallic hardcore elements were way more prominent. So I don't know if this band has decided to kind of like bring back their older sound, but there's a lot of stuff on here that sounds like Earth Crisis or Strife, you know, like especially in the groovy sections. Lots of syncopated chugs. The transitions into breakdowns especially have a old school metallic hardcore sound, and we're talking like 90s metallic hardcore, like, you know, the extra gritty shit that, you know, you were pissed off because people were eating meat. Vegans were extra angry in the 90s. Don't believe me? Look at footage of any hardcore show that had, well, Earth Crisis at the top of the bill. But that old school sound is kind of all over this. Like, you know, it kind of bleeds over into territory, you know, almost kind of like close to Knocked Loose. Not a bad thing, because I like that stuff. I like punishing, heavy, groove-laden hardcore. And they do a good job kind of trading off. Like, you'll get sections that are definitely more like death metal leaning, and then you'll get into more sections that are more like syncopated hardcore chugs and, you know, vocals that lean a little bit more that direction too. But they also blend it well. Like, weaving cerebral horrors, like, you kind of go back and forth between like just groove-laden hardcore punishment to like harmonized riffs that definitely have a more death metal flair to them. Stuck, Stomped, and Smeared, which is definitely what I've seen happen at a lot of shows.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, kids getting out of the pit. It's like, oh, look at you. You're just kind of leaking blood everywhere. That song definitely has, again, like a lot of hardcore energy. There's some fun two-steps. Again, it's built more on the chugs. This style is kind of what we should call deathcore, but we don't call it deathcore because deathcore is a dirty word because of deathcore bands we don't like.
I will say that Stuck, Stomped, and Smeared also has kind of a, I don't know, like Dying Fetus meets Crowbar sort of vibe too. The melodies lean a little bit more towards Crowbar, whereas the overall feeling and the chugs and just the way everything's presented has kind of a slammy Dying Fetus vibe. That is one of the heavier songs on the record. Actually,
towards the end of the album, I found a lot more like brutal death metal influences. You know, Dying Fetus, again, Sanguisugabog, maybe like a little bit of like 200 Stab Wounds too. With each voracious lick, which is exactly how I get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. That song is flat out disgusting, and this is one of the songs I absolutely love Garrett's vocals on. He does a great high-low flip, and his enunciation, I think, is just absolutely awesome. There's parts in there where he actually kind of reminds me of Sven from Aborted, just because he can make out a lot of what he says on that higher scream. That song has a lot of like really clever transitions, again, kind of balancing out this whole like hardcore death metal sound. One of my big standouts, just because it's just brutal as hell, but it achieves it in some different ways. There's even some thrashier sections on it too.
And it's not completely stripped of atmosphere, albeit there's far less atmosphere than there was on Seraphic Punishment. The song Unbridled Delusions, first of all, instant melodic hook. I think that's one of the hookiest songs on this record. But that song, it seems just to be a little bit more lurching and a little bit darker, and it does incorporate little brief moments of atmosphere.
And Illyrian Deceit is kind of the same way too. You get clean melodies that open it up. It definitely has a more sinister vibe overall. Sinister is not the main vibe on this album. Most of it is just like, listen, dude, I will fight you. I will jam this broken beer bottle right in your face.
Yeah.
This song, though, in particular, kind of builds up everything, like the atmosphere. Like, it has, again, like a more, like, almost kind of like doom-laden vibe. There's some dissonant melodies on it. Garrett's vocals are a little bit more drawn out. He even does, like, a lot more higher screams. And then, well, it kind of just ends. Now, in terms of, like, other like atmospheric bits on here, a lot of it is transitional atmosphere between the tracks, and generally that's like some feedback or such. Like, you do get like kind of a weird synth swell in the last track, Drawn to Drowning. but a lot of it is more just like ambient noise in the background and then boom into the next track. Atmosphere, though, overall, I feel like is missing on here, at least in comparison to the first album. But that's not the only thing that I think is missing. While I enjoy this, it is punishing through and through. Overall, like I kind of feel like it is missing a lot of the charm of the first album, just in terms of like more songwriting dynamics. A lot of this really just sticks to its guns. Granted, their guns are high caliber and probably will take out like an army of bears, but it feels very like no frills, you know, meat and potatoes, which meat and potatoes I like. You know, meat and potatoes death metal or meat and potatoes metallic hardcore, I dig. But coming from where they came from, you know, they were still kind of meat and potatoes before, but they had like a lot of clever seasoning on it that kind of made the songs pop a little bit. The atmosphere felt dark and sinister, but also punishing as hell. Here it's like, you know, the menu has changed. You know, the meat and potatoes are still on there, but they decided to kind of like just strip away the seasoning or change the seasoning a little bit, and it doesn't quite hit as hard for me, at least in terms of where they came from.
Yeah, they just leave the salt and pepper shakers on the table, but the holes are a little bit bigger just to see that you get the, you know, a healthy amount of salt and pepper.
They gaped them. They gaped the holes. That's what they call it.
Yeah, oh, I know. It's not bad. It's just really straightforward and fairly simplistic. Like, there's not a lot of real, like, transitions in the songs either. For the most part, it just stays droning on an open chord. Like, don't get me wrong, there's chugs all over here, and I like that. But it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, and there's some songs that, I mean, granted, a lot of these songs aren't super long, but some of them feel like they kind of stay kind of stuck in one point, like Midwest Death. I mean, we're all about that here.
I understand.
But this song, I mean, it even calls out the song title like a hardcore song would, but it kind of, I don't know, it feels like a brutal obituary song, like it's groove-laden, it locks on this main riff and stays on it, it's very driving, like, it feels like one of those songs where, like, yeah, we want the crowd to kind of sing this one back to us. And, you know, I like that stuff. Like, it's, you know, kind of anthemic, but it doesn't necessarily move. Like, it doesn't really build to anything big. And some of these songs, I feel like they do kind of, like, drop off a little bit towards the end. Like, you know, the energy kind of wanes, and then, well, we'll just do, like, a atmospheric transition to the next one.
And oddly enough, not a lot of these songs had what I would actually call breakdowns. Like, there's one in Blood Quantum, there's a cool triplet breakdown in Spontaneous Stigmata. Outside of that, though, I can't really hone in on too many breakdowns. Like in Unbridled Delusions, they started out with a really promising moment for a breakdown. Like, it really slowed down, it got almost doomy, and then there was no payoff.
I think there are breakdowns, but they're, again, like very old school breakdowns, like a lot more like single kick ones. Like, you don't get that more mid-2000s syncopated sort of like, you know, breakdown that you're used to in like any mid-2000s metalcore. This is more, again, like old school metalcore, so there's still like a lot of like single kick ones like, you know, Hatebreed and again, Earth Crisis, of course. But while I like those, I feel like, you know, they kind of like took the place of other things I liked, like, you know, lead work on here. Lead work on here is very minimal. It's very tasteful. Like, it fits the songs, but I feel like, you know, there were definitely more leads and more like lead harmonies and such that popped up in the previous one. And when they do kind of break outside of what they're doing on here, like in Alluring Deceit, where it is notably more sinister, slowed, almost doomy, I feel like it kind of just ends too soon. And there's other moments like that on this album, but they don't really like follow those moments very much. They kind of go back to, you know, what they do well in here, which is just punishing heavy, chunky guitars and just, you know, grooves and mosh pit anthems. This whole album is practically all bruisers, and I dig that. I dig the energy, but I also kind of miss the fact that there's definitely some stuff missing from the first album that I really fell in love with.
And the fact that it never really gets faster either. Like, we were just jamming some of Seraphic Punishment before we started the review, and I was like, oh, there's some fast moments. And you never really get away too much from groove. Like, there are a couple of D-beat moments, but it always seems to fall back to a slower, just kind of mid-tempo groove. And, like, I miss a little bit of the faster Maul. Like, in my opinion, I think they needed something faster, or at least like a little barn burner to kind of break up the fact that most of this is slow. So overall, I'm going to give this 3 stars. It is definitely, again, packed full of bruisers, packed full of really heavy songs, packed full of things that are definitely going to be mosh pit worthy that I'm probably going to stay the hell away from in the back because my knees are old and I'll die. It's chuggy, it's brutal, it's mean, and I really like that. But again, it is missing a lot of what I like, mainly the atmosphere. I feel like the stripped back filth and just the lack of that overall just kind of like brooding evilness that this band had is gone and has been replaced by simple open chugs and just, you know, ready to beat your face in. It is mostly meat and taters, and I do like meat and taters death metal. I'm a huge Jungle Rot fan. I mean, you know, you don't get a whole lot more meat and taters than that. I feel like just overall this record was stripped down a little bit, and while it is hefty and brutal, it's just, again, missing some of that special seasoning that they added to the last record just to do these songs up really well. Like, it's not bad, it just didn't catch me the way that I wanted it to. Overall, though, if you're still a fan of bands like Tribal Gaze, Mutilatred, definitely some hardcore acts, especially in the old school Victory days, you're probably going to really dig this. I would recommend checking it out.
I'm going to give it 3.5. I wasn't expecting, like, the nostalgic trip back to, like, you know, 90s metallic hardcore. But, I mean, it was kind of cool to hear that. Like, I love Earth Crisis and hearing, like, Earth Crisis grooves and such in there. That's pretty cool. But I will say I do miss the elements that I really fell in love with on the first album. They had a great balance of just flat-out savage riffs, but also, like, a lot of atmosphere. This album is all about just bruisers, I would say, for the most part. Like, these songs want to break teeth and break bones, and yeah, like that's kind of the vibe on here, and that's, you know, kind of the vibe of metallic hardcore, and I think they do a pretty good job mixing that with death metal. Like, I wouldn't say this is purely a metallic hardcore album. It's 60-40. There's still a little bit more death metal than there is hardcore, but I wasn't expecting all of that. And while I like the production for this sound in particular, like, I mean, if you want an absolutely punishing, brutal listen with just kind of no frills and just all just nastiness, like, this guy did a great job in terms of the guitar tone, the drums, the vocals. But again, like, there's just elements that I am kind of missing from their past one. So this one might take a little bit more to get used to, but overall I still dig it. Like, this is just a mean, gnarly listen, and it is just packed with groove. So yeah, if you're a fan, again, of, you know, 200 Stab Wounds, Sanguisugabog, I would even throw in, like, Jesus Piece in there. There's still enough, like, you know, Obituary and, you know, maybe like a little bit of Asphyx too. It's got a lot of just heavy influences across the board, and I think they play them pretty damn well. Either way, check this one out. Pretty solid listen. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. Again, we will eventually end Patreon when we figure out how to end Patreon. Yeah, you know, we suck at things.
I'm going to go home and study that, actually.
Yeah. I don't know. We'd probably got to go through some complicated process.
I would imagine
and then
so.
As soon as we click cancel, they'll ask us, are you sure you want to cancel? And like, yes! I hit the fucking button, didn't I?
Right?
Anyway. We're doing memberships now. If you would like to help us out there, there's a join button down below. The membership is only 99 cents. We only have one perk right now, which we are eventually going to do some members-only streams, and there's another chance there for you guys to talk to us about what's on your mind, you know, talk to us about what we should be going over, you know, like ideas for the channel, whatever you guys want to talk about. That's pretty much an open territory in there.
I mean, we gave you a booger troll.
We gave you a booger troll. That's the other perk. I don't know if that falls under perk, but that is our very, very special emoji.
I'd call it a perk.
Special, like stupid, but you know, it's pretty cool. But yeah, all you got to do is click join. We'd appreciate it. Totally not pressuring you guys to do it. Nope. It is totally up to you. We also still have our store at thrallsmetal.com. We still have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted. The new ones are not, even though they're technically old now. We also still have hats, so if you're interested in any of that stuff, click that link down below too.
And as always, tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography rankings, multiple discussion panels, states of metal, is it not metal, Nick's never-ending collection updates because he's never going to stop collecting CDs. What's John Jammin is making a return here soon. Just always tons of stuff to do, because what else are we going to do? The reason we do all this is for you guys, because we appreciate you. Thank you to all of our subscribers, our family, our friends, everybody that helps make Thralls of Metal really fucking awesome and more than just two dickheads in a basement. I mean, which we are, but you get the idea. Anyway, we do all this for you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule. Tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you because of all your rulage, and we will catch you later.